Hey everybody, it's GauntletX, and welcome to the Lost Caverns of Ixalan Arena Open. Today I'll be playing the Arena Open Day 1 event where we'll be competing in Best of 1 Lost Caverns of Ixalan Sealed, with the goal of getting 7 wins before 3 losses. If we pull off the 7-win run, we'll gain qualification into the Arena Open Day 2 event, a gauntlet of Best of 3 Lost Caverns of Ixalan drafts with the potential for huge cash prizes on the line. With that whole intro out of the way, let's just hop into the event and see what we get to play with today. And here's a look at the rares in our sealed pool. This is going to be post-commentary deck building so that I can get through the deck building process super fast and play as many of these arena opens as possible, but the gameplay itself is still going to have the live commentary. Anyways, we see a Trumpeting Carnosaur and Magmatic Galleon here as the strongest rares by far. Both of these are 2-for-1s in their own ways. The Carnosaur going to hit the board and discover another spell to cast that, plus it has the flexibility of being used as early removal if necessary, and the Magmatic Galleon's a 2-for-1 by being a removal spell when you play it, and a vehicle that sits around on the board, so those two are incredible rares. The Bedrock Tortoise is really large for its mana cost, which is pretty nice, and then the 2 black rares that we have are also pretty interesting. Souls of the Lost becoming a really big threat for cheap later in the game, and Stalactite Stalker getting bigger and bigger if you can descend pretty consistently, and potentially being a little removal spell on a stick. So really solid rares at a glance, but as you can see when I hit the play button here, I do go ahead and get right past these pretty quickly here. It's just the red ones that are super spicy to me. So I do the same thing that I always do, which is to take the premium cards out of each color, get a quick glance at how each color looks to me. So these are all of our really good white spells. Not a ton of them, but some super high quality ones in there, like Double Guidewing, Tinker's Tote, and the Cloud Guard for getting a wide board state of little creatures early. Then in blue, we've got a really low quantity of playables. We've got Double Cogwork Wrestler and like a Puzzle Door, which is cool, but that's basically it. Looking at black, as you can see, putting in all the cards that I think are decent or better, we actually get quite a lot of cards in there. We've got some premium stuff as well, of course, with the 2 rares, the Stalactite Stalker and the Souls of the Lost, so black is immediately standing out to me, as well as the white, just because I really like white in this format. When we move over to red, we see that we also have an Abrade, a Belligerent Yearling for cheap removal and a cheap threat, Plundering Pirates, which are great at dumping out your hand quickly with the extra treasure token, and of course the Galleon and Carnosaur, so we're almost 100% locked into playing red. And then I take a peek at the colorless and multicolored cards here. So for the colorless cards, we do have Sunbird Standard for some mana fixing if we need it, as well as a Compass Gnome, but our red is going to play best with just a nice streamlined 2-color build, so nothing much for the mana fixing there that's that exciting to me, but there is a Careening Minecart, which could fit well with our red cards, spitting out a bunch of treasure tokens as we crew it and attack with it. As for the multicolored cards, we do have 2 of the black-red signpost uncommon and 1 of the red-white one, so red-white and black-red immediately stand out to me as the things to check up on as I build the deck. So we grab Careening Minecart, take a peek at the red that way, but then I go ahead and do the usual. Let's see what the red-white deck looks like. Let's throw that signpost uncommon in there. Check out the mana curve, check out the removal suite, see if it looks good, and the mana curve's kind of awkward here, which I don't like. And you'll also see me start to cut some of the more mediocre cards out of here, which leaves it with even worse of a mana curve, kind of. Triple Archaeologist is also pretty mediocre, checking the creature to non-creature count. There's definitely some things to like about this deck. We have some high-quality cards, but it's not the most consistent deck throughout the game in terms of mana curve primarily. But it's got some decent synergies, obviously. Some cards like the Plundering Pirate putting 2 permanents on board with the Sunborn and stuff like that. But I take a quick peek at red-blue, immediately shove it away because the blue's just not very good, and that's when we move on to red-black, where we have so many options out of black and double Lava Tongue. And this is where we get into the bulk of the deck building. It's going to be just cutting out the cards that aren't super great for their mana cost and don't work super well in here, like Greedy Freebooter and Gargantuan Leech, but I actually like the Land Cyclers in this deck. So we have 2 Zoyoa Lava Tongue, 2 Deep Goblin Skull Taker and a Stalactite Stalker. That's 5 different cards that want us to be descending pretty consistently. So having 2 of these land cyclers up high on the mana curve gives us some extra ways to descend, because we can shove a permanent into our graveyard at instant speed for those. They're also good with the Souls of the Lost, making sure that we have more stuff in grave, and they guarantee that we have a tiny bit more top end than usual. So in some decks, I would instantly just cut the 2 land cyclers, but in this one, you can see that I leave them over there alongside the Carnosaur, because I think they're actually pretty good with some of our synergies. But yeah, Gargantuan Leech, we're not a Caves deck. Dowsing Device, we don't have that many artifacts. Bloodthorn Flail, Ancestor's Aid, just kind of mediocre. Combat Tricks and Equipment, we can find better stuff than that. So we drop all those out, and we're down to 4 more cuts to make. Find our most mediocre creatures across the curve. I actually do like the Screaming Phantom with all this Descend stuff as well, but Veto's Inquisitor and Broodrage Mycoid, not the greatest. They just haven't played super well. Especially Inquisitor, I think really wouldn't work in here, where you want to sack a bunch of stuff to make it worth its mana cost. We're not going to have a ton of expendable stuff to sacrifice. And then the Mycoid, the 1/1 funguses that can't block, hasn't been that much of a... that impressive of a payoff for consistently descending. I think we just have better cards than that for triggering off the Descendants, the Zoyoas, the Stalker, and the Skull Takers. So we cut that out of the deck. And then we're on to the last changes real quick. We're at 18 creatures, 7 non-creatures. So I'm like, all right, probably cut like a creature and a non-creature here, something like that would be fine. And Blade Master's pretty filler. And I don't love the double Skull Taker, so we make it nice and easy. Just cutting 1 Skull Taker and 1 of that swashbuckling pirate thing that wants you to have 2 artifacts on board. And that's pretty much the deck. So I never checked red-green. I wanted to check every single red color pair because red has our best rares. So I wanted to really make sure that I wasn't leaving anything behind in green, because I didn't really look at the color at all. But looking at this, there's a lot of awkward filler. The mana curve doesn't work super well. It's definitely just a weaker deck than the red-black deck that we decided upon. So, again, cursory glance here, but the curve is more awkward. There's less removal, there's less synergy, and there's more filler in the deck. So, discard those changes, head back into the final deck building, and this is going to be pretty much the final deck here. I do make 1 adjustment to the land count. Take a peek, and we've got 13 black spells and 12 red ones, but it wants 1 more red source than black because we have a lot of triple red in the late game. Since those are all late game spells, though, I do opt to go for the 9-8 split in black's favor. And I think that is about it for the deck building. Alright, here's a final look at today's deck list. We're on a black-red Descend deck. We have a lot of great synergy in the color pair, along with just the strongest cards in the sealed pool. So with Magmatic Galleon and Trumpeting Carnosaur, 2 massive 2-for-1 bomb rares in red, we're kind of locked into that color. And not only do we have those in red, we have a Souls of the Lost for a really large creature for cheap out of black, and a Stalactite Stalker in black as well. Outside of bomb rares, there's kind of a mythic uncommon here with Chupacabra Echo, which can be a removal spell on a stick kind of creature. Another one of these 2-for-1 style threats, which is always great. So just a lot of really, really high card quality between all of those spells. But in between all those big bombs and really powerful cards, we've got a good synergistic core to the deck. So with 2 copies of Zoyoa Lava Tongue alongside our descended rares like Souls of the Lost and Stalactite Stalker, we want to be shoving a lot of permanents into our graveyard to trigger cards that care about having descended this turn, or cards that care about the total number of cards in our grave, like the Chupacabra Echo. So we've got some ways to do that. With some of our top end, the Spiketail and the Monstrosaur, we can land cycle these, and that will count as putting a permanent into our graveyard that turn. We can discard the Carnosaur to deal some damage. We can also mill ourselves every turn with the Screaming Phantom, one of the most consistent ways to keep descending, one of the best ways to do that. And one of our cheap, efficient removal spells happens to work excellently with the Descend mechanic as well. This deadweight here can clear out a 2 toughness or less creature while putting a permanent into our graveyard for the turn to work with our cards like our Zoyoas and our Deep Goblin Skull Taker and stuff. So really nice synergistic core to the deck alongside a bunch of super powerful cards and a decent amount of removal with a Deadweight, Tithing Blade, a Braid, Idol, and Rumbling Rockslide. Even the Galleon counts, as does the Carnosaur, as does the Echo. It's actually quite a lot of interaction here and a very solid aggressive curve. A lot of 2s and 3s for your average sealed deck. So this deck kind of has everything going for it. The deck kind of built itself with the most powerful cards in the sealed pool, just kind of locking us into these 2 colors. It's a pretty simple deck build, but still a pretty powerful and pretty interesting deck to play. Without further ado, let's head into the gameplay and see how it does. All right, here we are for Game 1 of the Arena Open Day 1 event. Super reasonable hand. We have the best rare in our deck, alongside Zoyoa Lava Tongue to get things started. Miner's Guidewing to start things up for our opponents. They're very likely to have another creature alongside that soon, so they can explore onto that, but hopefully they don't get one by turn 3, so we can shoot that down without them actually getting the explore value. Of course, it was not to be. Market Gnome is the next play, and they're guaranteed to at least get the chance to explore when the Guidewing dies. Now, Kinjali's Dawnrunner from our opponent. Well, we found a new target for our Idol of the Deep King. We might just jam out a Screaming Phantom here so we can descend pretty consistently. Although I could also descend by discarding the Carnosaur. I think we really want to cast that on turn 5, though. Or turn 6, sorry. Just a Glorifier of Suffering to sack the Market Gnome, gain a life, draw a card, put a counter on Guidewing and Dawnrunner, which is disgusting. We take 6 here because of the double strike. Guess it probably would have been pretty reasonable at that time to go ahead and take the trade into the Guidewing. I suppose we can do it during our turn, though. And then we can idle whatever they target for the Explorer. Whoa. They're going to trade into the Zoyoa rather than the Phantom. Fair enough. Works with me. Death Touch doesn't work against the first strike anyway. Brazen Blade Master coming on down. Jam in for 3. Any artifacts to craft with? No. And then there's the Saw Blades to kill our creature. They only need 2 creatures to have that be a 4/4, which is kind of rough. Might want to just Rock Slide that. I think it's fine to just Pirate here. They'd have to play another artifact and blow up my pirate to get close to killing me, and thanks to the treasure token, if we're really scared, we can discard the Carnosaur to deal 3. Looks like they might be crafting the Saw Blades. At least looking at their graveyard, looking at the Saw Blades, seeing if they have a way to do so. I'd trade up with this straight up 3/2. I guess I take more damage if I trade with the Blade Master, but then we're not scared of them getting a 4/4 attacker later, which is nice. Yeah, they do have a Market Gnome in there to craft the Saw Blades with. Alright, so we're going to drop Carnosaur, hope to hit another blocker off of it, so we can have 2 blockers up here, ideally. We do hit another blocker, and it's a big one. What a discovery. Good lord. Now we are defended from that chariot for sure. There's a soaring sandwing we're not defended from, so I'll have to rock slide that. Play a pirate and rock slide it. Still have one treasure left behind to craft with the idol later. I think that is pretty reasonable to do. And thanks to having another creature out now, I'm pretty okay to attack with the giant trampler here, although they just crew in response. But then it would still take a double block to kill the Carnosaur, so I wouldn't hate that. And they did not crew in response, so we'll just get in for 7. Then we're just going to craft this and equip it to the Carnosaur, start hitting for 9 a turn. Trying to close this game out while holding up some blocks. Oltec Cloudguard is another flyer, which is not good for me at all. Whew. We are drawing very hot here. So the Galleon clears out the flyer. They still threaten the chariot on blocks, which means they could crew the chariot with the Glorifier and double block Carnosaur with chariot plus a 1/1, but they're down to just a 3/2 on board if that is what occurs. So I think we're still sending in the Carnosaur. And the more permanents that we have that die, the bigger the souls get, so we'll still have a very large threat and a very large blocker on the board. Alright, this time they'll crew in response. But yeah, I mean, killing Chariot and the 1/1, getting them down to just a single 3/2 on the board against our 5/5 vehicle, our 5/6, and our 3/2, I think is pretty okay. They do get to discover off their land when they run out of stuff to do. Alright, they are down to a 3/2. And here's their discovery. It's a 4/3 menace. Gives their 3/2 menace this turn, but I've got more than 2 blockers. Well, I have exactly 2 blockers, which is enough. Okay. Goes to our turn. We do find a creature, a Deep Goblin Skull Taker. Still no artifacts in the grave, so if I guess I don't even have enough treasures to crack the volcano and play the Skull Taker in the same turn. It is probably safest to get a guaranteed 3rd creature, so I can crew the Galleon on blocks, and we can just craft the idol this turn instead. It super matters who it's on. I suppose it's 6 life. I do have enough life to equip this to the souls and send an attack, and it's a little bold, but doesn't die on board. I think I want to wait till I crack Volcano and find like a 4th blocker to start attacking, though. Yeah, let's just put this on the Skull Taker. Okay. Crack the Volcano. Find a Yearling. There's a 4th blocker. They have 7 power. We have 8 toughness. We just attack with the Souls of the Lost every turn. Discover 10. Let's see what they hit. Spin that wheel. They do find an Abrade to kill our Galleon or our Skull Taker here. And they get a bunch of treasure tokens as well. Tapped treasure tokens, but treasures nonetheless. They are going to Abrade the Galleon. Get infinite mana. Send in the dino. Well, Double block and we have lethal off of our menace. They are tapped out now. No cards in hand is what I mean to say. Technically they have mana up, but they've got no cards left, so there will be the final swing, and we are 1-0 heading into game 2. Here we are on the play for game 2. No red source is sketchy, but starting with Stalactite Stalker is tempting. We have that and then a Tithing Blade for their first creature. Gotta draw that red source soon-ish. I think we have like 8 in the deck. There's definitely some risk here, but I'm going to keep it with Stalker into Tithing Blade as our early game. Playing against a blue deck. Now we've got a Screaming Phantom. Any land in our deck. And the Screaming Phantom Stalactite Stalker combo is going to be nuts. There's a Hermetic Nautilus. We did hit a land. Let's get that Phantom down and start trying to descend every single turn. Alright, opponent's going to tap out for the 4 damage, maybe? I mean, they're reading the Nautilus. They're thinking about it. Thinking about praising the Helix. And they are indeed going to do so. We're going to take 4. We're down to 16. But that is all they do for the turn. I could play a Yearling and Tithing Blade here, which feels pretty mana efficient and pretty powerful. We did descend this turn, so we'll get a counter on our Stalker. And we have a permanent for the Chupacabra Echo to give -1/-1 when it hits the board. There's a Glorifier Suffering on an empty board, always a pretty big bummer. And there's a Deconstruction Hammer as well. Gotta get one more permanent to my board before the Echo can kill the Glorifier, so I'm just gonna send all in, yet let the Yearling trade to descend again, and have the Chupacabra kill something else, maybe? Yeah. I guess if I choose just to definitely not play Chupacabra this turn, I can make sure Yearling's big enough to... Actually, no, it still doesn't attack in. I'm a doofus. I should have put that somewhere else. But yeah, I think I should have cast it this turn. I probably should have put that on my Phantom. For extra flying damage. I have no idea how I brain farted that one. Into thinking that this was like a 2/2 or something. Or that a Yearling was a 3/3. I thought that I was going to make its toughness high enough to send in without dying for some reason. Obvious. A little bit of a punt there. But I think it was still better to play the favor than do nothing else. And I guess on the plus side, we just put 2 more permanents in our graveyard by doing that, so that the Chupacabra Echo can definitely kill something. Alright, no more attacks with the Stalactite Stalker, but I can still send in for 5 damage on board. Cogwork Wrestler doesn't actually do a whole lot of work on this board state, which is nice. Trades into the Necromage, but that gives me more creatures when it dies, so the board state doesn't change much. I guess we go ahead and craft this thing, since I'm not playing the Echo or the Rock Slide without something to blow up. Now we'll start draining our opponent for life as well, unless they blow this up with their Deconstruction Hammer at some point. Chart a course, draw 2, discard 1. Quicksand Whirlpool the Stalker. They're at 9 life. They'll take another 2 this turn. Well, 3 because the Sepulcher as well. It's pretty good. I still don't think I ever cast the Echo until they play a creature. Even though I could pressure them for more damage, I already have inevitability with the Sepulcher. Even just the Sepulcher and 2 1/1s can do it. Ooh, Shamil, the Inner Sun. They get to discover 5 at the beginning of their end step every turn. It's pretty wild. Now they get to Brackish Blunder one of my tokens. They're gonna Plunder the Phantom. Fair enough. But they could have permanently killed a token instead. I mean, either way is a fine play for them. Ooh. Well, I know what I'm doing instead of the Monstrosaur. Or sorry, instead of the Phantom. And that is the Monstrosaur. Or they're going to keep that last tap counter there for the Monstrosaur. Well, for the Phantom, really, but now that I've played the Monstrosaur, we know what they're tapping. They are already dead on board to the 2 funguses and the Sepulcher. The 2 fungi, I should say. So they gotta hit something, and they hit a draw spell. Draw 3, discard 1. They're down to 1 mana to find a way to live. They find a green source. For some kind of splash, potentially. There's the Staunch Crewmate. Finds a Tinker's Tote. So they can tap the Monstrosaur, block a fungus, take 2, go to 1. But all it takes is 1 removal spell for me to put them dead on board. Oh yeah, the Chameel goes every single turn, so I have to play 2 removal spells now to kill them. But even 1 will be pretty good here. So we'll play the Chupacabra Echo, kill the blocker that would survive a fungus, and then send in with the 2 funguses to force a trade. Drop a Phantom and pass. I think I'm really playing around. I don't think I'm really playing around a board wipe out of the blue-white deck. There's 1 at rare, and that's it in the format. I think I'd rather play around them getting like huge card draw off of this into hitting really cheap interaction. Flip it into the braided thing and draw like 4 or 5 cards. I guess on this board they draw 6, but I suppose they don't have enough mana to play a bunch of individual removal spells after drawing those cards. Three blockers, and they're at 4 life now, thanks to the tote. I mean, they take 2 in the sky guaranteed, and the Trampler's big. I mean, Rock Slide sent in everybody is almost definitely lethal. Yeah, it definitely is. And that is going to close out this game. We are now 2-0 heading into game 3. Here we are now for game 3 with a very reasonable hand. Yearling gets us started. We have a Tithing Blade for some interaction, Plundering Pirate or Deep Goblin Skull Taker turn 3 onward, and a Swamp Cycler if we can't find mana here, so pretty into this hand. Our opponent is on the play with a turn 1 Hidden Volcano into a turn 2 Hidden Nursery, so they're going to have some pretty great value later in this game, making sure they really don't flood out. They'll get multiple Discovers later. There's the Idol of the Deep King, turn 3, to trade off into our Yearling and leave them with an equipment later in the game. Very unfortunately, we do not find a 3rd land in our first 3 draw steps, which is super rough, because the difference between having a Swamp Cycle here and just casting a 3-drop is pretty massive. But I suppose we Swamp Cycle. Four mana for our opponent now. There's a Sunshot Militia and a Burning Sun Cavalry. Find and Abrade. 3/2's big enough to trade into anything on board, and I'm fine with these trades. It's also more mana efficient, and it leaves behind a treasure. Alternatively, I can cycle the Monstrosaur and then play a Tithing Blade, which is also fine, and it guarantees I hit my 4th land drop on turn 4. It's also pretty valuable, leaves me with more options next turn. I think we'll roll with that. Probably blading away the Militia. Since they're a green-red deck, they probably have better use for the Cavalry than the Militia. And there's the Thrashing Brontodon to buff the Cavalry. That's basically a 3/3 now. But I do have an Abrade for that if I need it. I also have a Souls of the Lost that can be much bigger. Can play the Souls and just sack the Tithing Blade, hold up an Abrade from there. Don't hate it at all. Puts another permanence in my graveyard without needing to discard any of this gas. There's a 4/5 on blocks, so we are all stable over here if they can't kill this one. A white source from our opponent, and it's time for them to start discovering, because this would be when they're flooding if they didn't have that stuff. They find a Cosmium Blast for 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. So that is revealed, thankfully for us. Ooh, wow. We need 1 more mana for this Magmatic Galleon. We probably slam down the Plundering Pirate, hold on to the treasure token, rather than casting an Abrade. But casting an Abrade is an option if it looks like it'll be necessary at any point here. Dino Automaton to get Menace? I don't think that really matters. I guess with the Cosmium Blast it does. They could kill both of our creatures here if we double blocked. Deal 4 damage to the Souls. And then the Brontodon does 2 to Pirate, 1 to Souls. So yeah, we don't have a good block against the Cosmium Blast if they give Menace. I mean, it's still a 2-for-2 trade, but I don't think we want to lose Souls of the Lost when it's going to just keep getting bigger and bigger. Alright, I don't actually want to cast Galleon until we've dealt with the Brontodon somehow. So we're casting one of our 3-drops and holding up an Abrade. Kind of like making Pirate big enough to trade into Brontodon, but also making Souls trample is pretty nuts too. Sure, let's give the Souls trample for later. Obviously not trying to send it in anywhere where it'll die to a Cosmium Blast, but trample's a pretty good ability to have on our creature that's going to get really massive throughout this game. So currently, if I were to attack in, I could Abrade the Dynatomaton on a double block, but then they can just Cosmium Blast the Souls, and it'll still trade off. So I don't think I'd do that. I guess I do have enough mana to just naturally cast Galleon at this point. So I don't need to hold up Abrade if I want to play a Screaming Phantom or something instead, and I kind of do. Screaming Phantom really enables our Souls of the Lost and our Deep Goblin Skull Taker. It's going to make sure those are just massive. Alright, land for our opponent, so they're going to crack the Hidden Nursery, so they do not have Cosmium Blast up, so now we probably do have pretty good Souls of the Lost attacks when we're holding up an Abrade. They do send in the Dynatomaton. I don't hate shoving more stuff in my grave. Oh, I guess they do have Cosmium Blast up off the treasure, but since both of these have 3 power, they can't save that Dynatomaton. But I do need to keep in mind that they actually do have Cosmium Blast up now. So Skull Taker and Abrade. We have 8 toughness. They can shoot 4 of it. They need to block with 4 more power. If I Galleon, they Bronted on the Galleon. I mean, I guess I could Galleon targeting Plundering Pirate. And then it's like, if they Bronted on the Galleon has still dealt the 5. So I just kill 2 of their creatures if they choose to Brontodon the Galleon. It's actually probably pretty reasonable. Just clear a path here. If I target the Brontodon, they can easily just respond by targeting the Galleon with the Brontodon, since it would be about to die anyway. But if I target a different creature, then we end up doing great. So because the way Cosmium Blast works, they have to do it right now during combat, which means we can ruin it with our Braid, which is awesome. And yeah, pretty much no shot for our opponent now, so they are going to scoop them up, and we're 3-0 heading to Game 4. Alright, here we are on the draw. My bad. On the draw for game number 4. We've got a turn 2 Yearling, turn 3 Phantom, and a Deadweight wherever we need it. So it's a pretty solid start to the game. Skullcap Snail for later. If this Yearling is still around by the time we play a Monstrosaur, that's going to be a great enter the battlefield trigger, turning it into a 6-power trampler for the turn. Ooh, Souls of the Lost. Unfortunately, I only have 1 black source, so I can't play Deadweight and Screaming Phantom? Or can't play Deadweight and Souls of the Lost. I can't play Deadweight and Screaming Phantom either, but that's for different reasons. I think I'm just going to Deadweight the Skull Taker right now, since it's potentially getting bigger. If this were a Swamp Cycler, I think I'd cash it in here with 3 black spells in hand, but another mountain isn't actually that valuable to me, so I'm just going to hold on to the Monstrosaur. Another swamp being infinitely more valuable to me. Okay, and we find the other swamp, which is obviously beautiful. 1/1 body on the board, probably not super duper awesome for me. So I think I can play this snail and sack it to the souls here. It's a pretty reasonable use of all my mana for the turn. Yeah. Keep the land so we're close to the 6 for the Monstrosaur. And then Souls is a 3/4 already. Got them to get rid of a Deathcap Marionette from their hand. Alright, here comes Screaming Phantom filling up their graveyard for their Descend cards. We're down to 18. Find a Plundering Pirate. Plundering Pirate guarantees a Monstrosaur next turn. Do I play around Cosmium Blast from our opponent? The 1 and a white common, deal 4 damage to an attacker or blocker. I guess if they do that, I can just respond by cycling Monstrosaur, and that's really going to ruin our opponent's day, so we just send in. Oh, it's the uncommon. We don't have enough permanence here to play around that. I could just make it 5 toughness where it still dies. Sad. Alright, then I pirate because we're not cycling the Monstrosaur at that point. This guarantees Monstrosaur next turn. I guess I could play Pirate and Phantom instead, so that if I do top deck a land, I've got all on the board, which would be pretty nuts. I probably should have went for Greed there. Double spelled. Veto's Inquisitor, pretty good with the Mephitic Draft on their board, but there's the Abrade while they don't have a black source up. I think I want to kill that then. So, Screaming Phantom Abrade for the turn instead of Monstrosaur. And now we're racing, and we are dealing more to them than they are to us right now. Even without the Giant Trampler. There's their own Souls of the Lost, though, and that's going to change this clock significantly. Don't remember if we got any black removal that can kill something that big. No, we didn't get the double black in one -10/-10 removal spell in our sealed pool. We only have stuff to kill small creatures. Unless I get a ton of permanents in my grave, then I guess a Chupacabra Echo could maybe clear that out. But Souls of the Lost is actually very good against our deck. Because all our removal is just little damage stuff, for the most part. Phantom for Phantom here. 5 toughness. 5 toughness is considerably worse than 6 on this board. Phantom for Phantom it is. Six permanents in our grave. So if I just sack a land, then Chupacabra does enough damage to, well, gives enough -X/-X to kill their souls. Can't sack a land now, though. Can hit them for 3 and then go to 4, and then I have to chump from there. If I attack right now, though, I'm dead to them drawing any creature, because they just play a creature, crew the chariot, and I'm dead, because it's crew for only 1. Alright. Sad day. We just don't have removal big enough to kill this thing, so it's gonna roll us whenever we play against it. Is what it is. 3-1 heading into game number 5. Here we are on the play for game 5. Nothing till turn 3, but that's not so bad when we're on the play. Enterprising Scallywag from our opponent. I think I saved the Abrade right now. You know what, I could play Pirate, and the next turn I can go Skull Taker, cycle the Spike Tail to have Descended for the Skull Taker. So it's a 3/3 menace. That's pretty cool. Or if they removal spell Pirate, that'll work too. Although now I'm literally 1 mana from just casting the Spike Tail, so at that point, it's probably not worth the +1/+1 counter. Colossadactyl, 4/5 reach trample. Big stuff. Hey, speaking of big stuff, there's our own. Spiketail's more damage in the grand scheme of things. Blocks really well against Colossadactyl as well. I should get to hit for the full 7 here, because the menace. And they're down to 10. Hit that 6th mana to cast the Monstrosaur. That's pretty beautiful. So they can double block and have 7 toughness against the 5 power. Vitali's Favor says 7 toughness against their 6 power, but they have so much mana untapped. I don't think I want to play stuff that's weak to instant speed removal. I think I just send in the homies and see what happens. They probably double block, kill Spiketail, and then Skull Taker gets bigger. Or they do some combat trick nonsense here. Double block the Skull Taker. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. No tricks, it looks like. Alright. I mean, I think the blocks were okay for us. We'll just play Monster Store. They had nothing to do with all that open mana, and so they are just going to concede here. We are now 4-1 heading into round number 6. Here we are for game 6 on the draw again. We've got a nice early deadweight if we need it. It's not big enough to kill Kellen. That is gonna suck. Turn 2. If our opponent reveals any creatures on top of their deck, they're just gonna get a huge card dungeon from that thing. Constantly digging all their cheap creatures out of their deck. It's also a map token and a 2/3, so it's already great value. They're going to play a Visage of Dread instead, though. They do not have the white source yet, so maybe Kellen's a splash here and they're green-black at the core. Not a big fan of this Visage. They just get the Chupacabra Echo, and our best card is gone. I would be tremendously surprised if they choose either of the other two creatures. Chupacabra Echo is indeed gone. Here's Skullcap Snail, and we'll pass from there. Got them to exile a Tithing Blade, because it will play pretty poorly against the 1/1 on board anyway. There's a Captivating Cave, which gives them the white source they need for Kellen. You can just drop that 2/3 here, it's already safe from deadweight. But I can still make it a 0/1 at least, so it can't really get its trigger going over and over. Unless they can blow up my deadweight. Like, it's gonna get one attack and then we just kill it when it attacks in. Or if they've got combat tricks here, that could work too. I guess they could also use the map tokens trying to buff it up to big enough. They do find a non-land card, so it is a 1/2. If they kill my Plundering Pirate, Kellen can get in now. And then we're incredibly far behind because we're down a card from using a deadweight that didn't end up working. As well as just being down cards from the Visage being a 2-for-1 and the Kellen being a 2-for-1 if it draws anything off its attacks. Ooh, Stalactite Stalker. We descended, we get a +1/+1 counter on this thing. That is pretty dang nice. I would be massively surprised if my opponent blocks here. It is 1 point of damage. Yeah. But I would be pretty happy if they did, because then I could either buff my Stalker or I could kill their Kellen with it if I wanted to. Because I can sack this for -1/-1, or if it's on my board during my end step and my snail had died, then it would be a 2/2. Gets the +1/+1 counter on it, and then I could sack it for -2/-2 to something. Sovereign Okenek Ahau. When their creatures attack with power greater than their base power, they get a bunch of +1/+1 counters on them, and that card is really hard to target with Ward 2 as well. That is a Nightmare Bomb. Speaking of Nightmare Bombs, we have drawn our Carnosaur, but I can't play it until next turn. That is going to be tremendously helpful here, though. How on earth did they even afford that? Oh, they had to sack their buried treasure. Makes sense. So, I mean, worst case scenario, they do some really funny business. We can discard the Carnosaur to deal 3 to something. I would really rather not have to do that. So we'll see what our opponent's doing. Passing the turn. Alright, cool stuff. We are going to cast the heck out of this Carnosaur then. And discover Magmatic Galleon? Good grief! I don't have the mana to pay for the ward, sadly, so we gotta shoot Kellen, but still like that. Can't get any good attacks in here. I'm gonna guess I can send the Menace Dork in now, if there's only one blocker. But that is it. I've already descended this turn because a deadweight just ended up in my graveyard. So that's pretty cute. Alright, opponent passes the turn. Now we just get some big nasty attacks, I think. Yeah, try to push the pressure on here. Get some descended triggers and a bunch of damage. And try to beat them down while they're looking for lands. Yeah, I mean, you got it. We're still very head on board. This is super fine with me. They're down to 11. Can drop Zoyoa with a descended trigger and discover off of the hidden volcano this turn. Could sack the Stalker to finish the Sovereign, but I think I'm just going to get a wide board here. Oh my lord, Death Touch Trample now. A Screaming Phantom. We're just discovering our whole deck over here. There's a Scampering Surveyor from our opponent for them to finally find some mana, but they are over it. They're going to scoop it up. We are now 5-1 heading into round 7. Alright, here we are on the play for game 7. We got that Zoyoa turn 2 to get things started. We've got a deadweight for removal, which also works really well with Zoyoa. Speaking of things that work well with Zoyoa, Death Touch Trample is nasty because we just have to do 1 damage to their blocker and the rest to their face. So that's another way to pressure them with a lot of extra damage. There is an Oaken Siren from our opponent, and that's going to lead to a great mana-efficient turn here of Plundering Pirate Deadweight and trigger Zoyoa to make them discard a card or take 3. Because Deadweight will have gone to our graveyard and triggered our Descended ability. So our opponent takes the 3, they're down to 15. There's a River Herald Scouts, which is going to stay as a 1-2 and draw them a Plains. Drawn to a Skullcap Snail. I can just clear out the blocker, but it's not offending me at all here, so I'm just going to Tali's Favor the Lava Tongue. And find a Stalactite Stalker, which is not a bad one to find. Opponent is now down to 9, and we pass the turn. There's their own Atali's Favor, so they have a 2-3 blocker and Dreadmaw's Ire, which is a really bad discovery for them. They're going to have to just draw that to hand here. There's a Rumbling Rockslide to kill the only blocker, but they are over it. They're going to concede the game, and we are now 6-1, 1 victory away from day 2 of the Arena Open. Not only that, we are guaranteed to be getting some prizes out of the event, so even if we scrub out from here, we at least got half of our gems back out of this run. So without further ado, let's head into that final battle with 2 rounds in the chamber. Alright, here we are on the play again, this time with that same curve, but even better. Now we go Stalker, Lava Tongue, and then Pirate and Deadweight in the same turn. If they play something that can be deadweighted, well, 2 things here. If we hit land 3 by turn 3, and they play something that can be deadweighted, this is going to be about as filthy of a start as our deck can possibly have, where we're going to be able to Pirate and deadweight something, and also trigger 2 different powerful Descended cards, Zoyoa and Stalactite Stalker. So they play something with 2 toughness here, the game might just straight be over. And they do play a Miner's Guidewing, which can absolutely die to a deadweight. That's gonna be the play. I would love to descend this turn. And now we have get a +1/+1 counter, make them lose 3 or discard a card. And then we've got a Rumbling Rock Slide for their next blocker. I think the main things that could win our opponent the game here are board wipes. There is an uncommon -2/2 to everybody for 3 mana. And then there's 1 rare. I guess there's a couple rares. Since they're in black and white, they could have one of the 2 black rare board wipes, or they could have the 1 white rare board wipe, or the black uncommon. But black-white is a color pair that tends to have a lot of cheap little aggro dorks, like Guidewing and expendable sack fodder creatures, so they're not really a deck that wants to have too many board wipes, because they'd be killing a lot of their own stuff too. So a 2/1, I really don't want to have to Rock Slide to get that out of the way, but it is big enough to kill any of my creatures, so it feels reasonable to do so. We hit for 7, put them to 9 if I do that. I guess I could just trade Stalker into it. Trigger the Descended here and hit for 5. Save Rock Slide for a bigger blocker. I think I'm just going to Rock Slide it, because if I get a land off the top, being able to sack the Stalker and play the Snail in the same turn is nice. It's pretty mana efficient for any other 2 toughness or less creatures they end up playing. And in a black-white deck, I expect them to have a lot of those. Even at 4 mana, they could have the 4 mana 3/2 flyer that spits out a 1/1. Alright, so they play nothing this turn, so probably like deal 4 to an attacking creature or something they have to use defensively. Flanker, that works too. I could trade Stalker into the Flanker, but I do like the Menace. And I want to play another spell, I think. So we'll let them trade with Zoyo, I think. And then we just play Skullcap Snail here. Echo their next threat. I guess they're not really threats, they're blockers at this point. But we'll echo their next blocker, hopefully. And yeah, like, even if Zoyo dies here, it means Stalker's bigger. Alright, got rid of a Deconstruction Hammer. Stalker's now a 3/3 menace, and they're at 6. We have a -2/2 removal spell in hand with our Chupacabra Echo. And there's the 4th mana for the potential 4 mana 3/2, spits out a 1/1, but it's going to be Spring-Loaded Sawblades on the defensive here. Kill the Stalker, so we only have 4 power on the board, and then they still have 2 mana up if they do have a cheap blocker to cast. 3 permanents in our graveyard for the Echo now, so we can give -3/3, so we can probably kill pretty much anything they'd be casting for 2. And if they cast nothing, then they take 4 damage on board. They are going to cast a Helping Hand on the Flanker to gain a couple more life. Scry again, and have a 3/1 blocker for later, but I can still Chupacabra Echo the Flanker. Even though it's tapped, it's not blocking this turn. It will be able to block in the future, so shutting it down does feel pretty nice. Alright, crack the map, draw land. We hit our own land here. Shaman for 4 and kill the Flanker. So they have to cast some blockers here. They can't just like flip a Sawblades because it doesn't block without something to crew it or some more artifacts on their board. They do have a Guidewing, so they could flip the Sawblades if they have an artifact engrave, which they do. So now they could flip Sawblades and block with it by crewing it with Guidewing, in which case they would still take 4. Which is exact Z's. So they have to have another spell in hand. And I guess we'll see what that other spell is, because we certainly don't have options over here. Force it to be a removal spell for them to be alive another turn. And it is a removal spell. It's a Join the Dead. So our opponent's going to go to 1, hope to draw a 1-mana creature that they can play to crew their Saw Blades, most likely. Is their best out. Removal spells work too. Now that they have the Hidden Courtyard, it's got to be something big enough to block Echo or something that can kill it. It's a Resplendent Angel, which is going to have to just chump block the Echo at least. We find a Belligerent Yearling, so now we have a Trampling Threats. So they need to hit a 1-mana creature to crew the Saw Blades or a big enough creature to block Yearling and not die. Gemguard's big enough to block Yearling, but it will trade. It's really turning into a top deck war here, and I don't like that. Because we're hitting some lands. Alright, flip the Saw Blades for our opponent, it looks like. I guess I do have like a couple cards in here that would just shoot my opponent in the face for lethal out of nowhere, right? We have the Idol of the Deep King and the Trumpeting Carnosaur. I can discard the Carnosaur to shoot my opponent in the face, and I could just cast the Idol to shoot my opponent in the face. Alright, they need to hit an artifact or a creature here. Creature to crew the Chariot, artifact could also crew the Chariot, because 2 artifacts on board does it, and it's Duskrow's Reliquary to kill the pirate. The war continues. Another land for us, we'll play it and pass. There's Glorifier of Suffering for a 3/2. But that means they can crew the Chariot over and over. Would be pretty bold for our opponent to go for the crew here, because there are some really playable hasters. Ooh, and there's the Carnosaur. Oh, it's Creature Planeswalker. Oh, shoot. It doesn't actually shoot any target. Okay, well this wasn't actually an out to insta-kill them, but still an out to probably win. Tithing Blade's an out to insta-kill them. Flips into the side that drains them for a life. So we did have 2, at least, ways to insta-kill them. Even if Carnosaur was not one of them. Either way, we won the top deck war in the end. I was getting real sketched out, because the Chariot on their board meant they still had like an extra spell there when we had nothing and we were just top decking, so they still had that Chariot to flip and then start beating down with, but we did find some amount of gas to win that game. I think it was, once we got into a top deck war of 20 life to 1 life, we were probably statistically pretty favored there. I just always get really nervous when it's all up to what's on top of the decks here. We have to draw more threats than they draw answers, and yeah, luckily enough we did. Very much in part due to the fact that the Carnosaur is 2 threats off of the 1 card, one of which is a 7-power trampler, so hitting 2 threats off 1 card in the end being really, really helpful, really favorable there. Alright, excellent run out of this Arena Open Day 1 event. Obviously a 7-win run, so we will be playing the Arena Open Day 2 draft number 1 at the very least, and that is with some huge prizes on the line. But this was a really sweet deck, obviously. This is probably the best black-red deck I will ever play in this format. Kind of looks like a pretty streamlined black-red Descend draft deck. Like, I feel like this will be the best, most synergistic black-red Descend deck I will ever play in the format, even when you count draft into account, because the amount of things we had to get the Stalactite Stalker and the Zoyoas going was just really nice. Like, the deadweight for the cheap removal played super well. That curve of the Stalker into Zoyoa into Plundering Pirate with the deadweight to play after the pirate hits the board was really gross. Atali's Favor for Death Touch Trample on the Lava Tongue was great. This curve is really aggressive for Sealed, so that's also awesome. And we have huge bombs that really helped us out. The Galleon and the Carnosaur primarily, but the Stalactite Stalker and the Souls of the Lost also played very, very well for us. So really nice sealed event. Relatively simple one deck building wise. Obviously I did the deck building commentary post recording, so I don't know exactly what I said about the deck building, but in real time I built this deck in like 4 minutes. I just looked at all the colors. I was like, okay, we have Carnosaur Galleon. We also have Stalker and Souls of the Lost, and way more black and red than anything else. Well, way more black than any other color, I should say. Red's a little tiny bit light, but the quality is really there in that color. So it was really just, this is where the sealed pool sent us. And in return, we sent it. We full sent it with this deck all the way to a 7-win run. So that is going to end the Arena Open Day 1 sealed events, but that does mean that tomorrow we are going to have the Arena Open Day 2 draft number 1, the super high stakes best of 3 draft of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So really exciting time if you're interested in that. That is coming on to the channel tomorrow. That is going to be a draft where we are competing for potential entry into Day 2 draft number 2. And if we make it into that draft, that is the draft we're competing for up to $2,000 in cash prizes. So big stuff, really competitive stuff, always fun to draft the set at a really high level, so it'll be super cool to just see what happens no matter what. So hopefully at the bare minimum, I'm always shooting for at least getting to Day 2, draft number 2. That's where I'm happy almost no matter what, because at that point, we got to draft the set at high level twice in a row, got 2 different decks, got to play against a lot of different opponents. It's a really fun time if you can get into those Day 2 drafts, especially if you can get into both of them. But as for now, that is going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their support, as well as you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video and you're interested in seeing my Arena Open Day 2 playthrough, stick around on the channel. You can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you more of these videos as well. And if you're interested in catching me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. But other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.